The cowboy had learned the language of quiet the hard way. It came to him after years of dust and gunfire, after nights when the stars felt like witnesses rather than comfort, after choices that kept breathing but took something else in payment. On his ranch, the wind did most of the talking. It slid through grass the color of old gold, tapped the boards of the corral, and whispered against the windows as if checking whether he was still there. He answered it by waking before dawn, by fixing what broke, by tending the few head of cattle that remained, by letting days pass like water through cupped hands. His name had once mattered to more people than it did now. Out here, it mattered only to the ledger, to the horse that lifted its head when he said it, and to himself, when memory reached up like a thorn. The ranch sat between low hills and a dry creek bed that ran in a hurry only when the storms remembered this land. He kept a small garden close to the house, a windmill that complained when the breeze leaned on it wrong, and a fence that had been repaired so many times it looked like a story stitched together from different years. He did not expect visitors. That was part of the bargain. The nearest town lay half a day's ride away, and the trail that passed near his property had thinned to a rumor. When hoofbeats came, they were usually his own, returning at dusk. When voices came, they belonged to the past. The morning the two girls arrived, the sky wore a low, patient gray. The cowboy had been mending a gate, hands smelling of iron and old wood, when his horse pricked its ears. He followed the animal's gaze to the edge of the creek bed. Two figures stood there, small against the open land, dark hair loose, dresses torn at the hem, feet wrapped in worn moccasins that had known better days. They did not wave. They did not call. They waited as if the ground itself had told them to stop there. He straightened slowly, letting his hands fall away from the tools. Years ago, he might have reached for something else. Now he reached for breath and gave it time to steady him. He took a step, then another, until the space between them was small enough to feel the weight of their silence. They were young, but not children. Their eyes held a carefulness that comes from watching grown people make dangerous decisions. The taller one met his gaze, the other stayed half a step behind, fingers tangled in the cloth of her sister's sleeve. "We need shelter," the taller one said. Her voice was hoarse, as if she had spent the night arguing with the wind. "Just for a little while." He nodded once. Words could wait. He gestured toward the house, then turned to lead the way. He felt their footsteps behind him, light and quick, as if they expected the earth to change its mind. Inside, the house smelled of coffee grounds and soap. He set a kettle on the stove, filled a tin cup for each of them, and laid bread on the table. They ate with the hunger of people who had learned to be polite about it. When the kettle sang, he poured, and steam rose to blur the room, softening the sharp edges of the morning. "My name is Eli," he said finally. It felt like a small thing to offer, but small things were what he had left. "You can stay until you can't." The taller girl nodded. "I'm Wiaka. This is Luma." They did not say where they came from. He did not ask. Shelter, he had learned, was sometimes just a roof and sometimes a promise not to pry. The days that followed took on a different rhythm. Eli kept to his chores, and the girls found ways to make themselves useful without being asked. Luma coaxed green from the stubborn garden, speaking to the plants as if they were old friends who needed reminding. Wiaka helped with the animals, her movements steady and sure. At night, they sat on the porch and watched the light drain from the land. The stars arrived like a crowd that knew where to stand. Once, a storm came sudden and loud. Rain hammered the roof, and thunder rolled like a wagon over stone. Luma startled and reached for her sister. Eli watched the way Wiaka's jaw set, how she placed herself slightly between the sound and the one she loved. It was an old posture. He recognized it because he had worn it himself. When the storm passed, the creek ran briefly, brown and full, then sank back into its bed. Eli walked its length the next morning, checking for damage. He found tracks he did not like, heavy boots where there should have been none. He said nothing when he returned, but he fixed the latch on the gate and brought his rifle closer to the door at night. The wind kept its counsel. It was Luma who spoke first of what followed them. She did it by asking a question that had nothing to do with danger. "Why do you live alone?" she asked, handing him a bowl she had washed. He considered the truth, the parts of it that could be held without cutting. "Because it's quieter," he said. She nodded as if that made sense. "Sometimes quiet keeps you safe," she said. "Sometimes it doesn't." Wiaka shot her a look, but did not stop her. Eli met Luma's eyes and saw the tremor there, the ripple of something trying not to spill. "What's coming?" he asked. "Men," Wiaka said. "They want land that isn't theirs. They think they can take it if they make enough noise." Eli breathed out. The past shifted, restless. "How many?" "Enough," Wiaka said. He did not ask more. He did not tell them to leave. He weighed the shape of the days ahead and decided to meet them standing. They prepared without spectacle. Eli moved his cattle to the far pasture, mended the fence where it was weakest, and cleared brush near the creek. Wiaka showed him how to read the ground in ways he had forgotten, how to see where feet had hesitated, where they had hurried. Luma gathered herbs from the hills, explaining their uses in a soft voice that seemed to make the land lean closer. On the third night after the storm, the wind brought voices. Not words, just the idea of them, carried low. Eli woke and lay still, counting the spaces between sounds. He rose and stepped onto the porch. The moon hung thin and sharp, a blade held up for inspection. He did not see them at first. Then a shadow moved where no shadow should have. Eli lifted his hand, a signal he had not used in years. Wiaka appeared at his side as if she had been part of the night all along. Luma stayed inside, breath held. "Go back," Eli called. His voice traveled cleanly. "There's nothing for you here." A laugh answered him, mean and careless. "That's what we aim to see." Eli felt the old heat stir, the familiar narrowing of the world. He let it pass through him and out. He stood his ground. He did not advance. What followed was not the kind of thing songs are made of. It was confusion and fear and the sound of a gate slamming. It was the land itself taking a side, roots catching a boot, the creek bed turning treacherous under a wrong step. Eli fired once, into the dirt, the report a promise rather than a threat. Wiaka moved like a thought, guiding, misdirecting, keeping Luma safe. The men retreated with curses and threats they would regret repeating. Dawn found the ranch battered but standing. Eli sat on the porch, hands shaking now that the night had let him go. Luma pressed a cup into his palms, steam curling like reassurance. Wiaka checked the perimeter, her face a map of focus. "They'll come back," she said. "Maybe," Eli said. "But not the same way." Word traveled faster than Eli expected. By the time a week had passed, riders arrived from the direction of the town, not the men from the night, but others, people who had heard enough to ask questions. Some came with curiosity, some with concern, some with old grievances warmed over. Eli answered what he could. He did not offer the girls' names to anyone who did not need them. One afternoon, an elder from a nearby community arrived. He dismounted with care and looked around as if greeting a place he had known long ago. He spoke with Wiaka and Luma in a language that sounded like water over stone. Eli sat apart, listening without understanding, feeling something loosen in his chest. When the elder turned to him, his eyes were kind and sharp. "You did not send them away," he said. "No," Eli said. "Then you did a good thing," the elder said. Good things ask for patience. Patience was something Eli could offer. He had a long practice of waiting. What surprised him was how the waiting changed shape. The ranch was no longer just a refuge, it was a meeting place. People came to talk, to share news, to trade. The quiet did not leave, but it learned to share. There were mornings when Eli rode out alone and let memory have its say. There were evenings when he returned to laughter on the porch. He watched Wiaka teach Luma how to set a snare, how to read the clouds, how to speak when speaking mattered. He learned from them in turn, about names for things he had never bothered to name, about histories that ran under his own like an unseen river. Trouble did not vanish. It rarely does. But it learned new rules. When men came again, they found more than a single rancher and his worn fences. They found eyes watching from the hills, voices raised in daylight, the kind of attention that makes bullies reconsider the cost of their noise. The seasons turned. The garden thrived. The windmill found a better angle and complained less. Eli repaired the house not because it was broken, but because he wanted it to last. He thought of the quiet he had chased and realized it had not been silence he needed, but balance. One night, as they watched the stars arrange themselves into old stories, Luma leaned against the porch rail. "Do you miss being alone?" she asked. Eli considered the question and found it had changed since the last time it was asked. "I miss being afraid of company," he said. "That was easier." Wiaka smiled, a small, knowing curve. "Easier isn't always safer," she said. The land listened, as it always had. It held their words and gave back what it could. Shelter, lessons, a place to stand when the world tried to push. And in that exchange, a quiet ranch became something else. Not loud, not grand, but alive in a way that did not ask permission.